Hey everybody, today I want to talk about the glow-in-the-dark petunia. It's called the Firefly, and about a year ago it was all over the news. All the buzz was about this new glow-in-the-dark petunia. It even made the cover of Time magazine. Well, I dished out $107 and bought 3 of them, so I spent a good bit of money to see what this petunia was all about, and I'm sure your question is, does it glow and does it grow? Well, I'll definitely get to that right away, and then after that I'll talk a little bit about the marketing and the history, and then I will give you a bit of a report on my experience growing that petunia. There are definitely some things that I want you to know about. If you're going to invest the money in it, you're going to want to know these things to make sure that you have some success with it, because there were some little things that I noticed about it that are important. So first of all, does it glow? Does it grow? The answer is yes and yes. Thank goodness it does glow. However, I do feel like I need to temper your expectations. I think a lot of people are imagining that this is one of those things that, it'll illuminate a room or it'll give you a nice glow around your path. Well, the truth is it needs to be really, really dark, like almost complete darkness for you to even be able to notice the glow. Otherwise, it just looks like a white petunia in like low light conditions. The color of the glow is actually a lot like a firefly. It has that little bit of green glow to it. However, it is dimmer than what I would consider a firefly to be. So it's just kind of this real kind of low glow, kind of like those stickers, like as a kid that you'd stick up on your ceiling of like the stars and the moon and the little Saturn one up there. It would be a little bit like that, but not how it looked like right when you turned off the lights, how it looked like a half hour later when they were starting to lose their power. So not a real bright glow, but interesting enough. And I will say it's one of those where if you have it in a nice dark spot and you're close up to it and you're looking at the glow, it is a bit hypnotic. It's kind of like when you're looking at a fire and you just kind of look at it, you get a little bit lost in it. I think part of it is because it's dark and your eyes are kind of focusing in and out and you're just looking at this really unusual kind of, it creates almost like a glowing landscape that you're following as you look over the blooms. And it is both the blooms and the stems and leaves have a little bit of glow, but it's really the newer blooms that are the brightest, and they'll kind of fade a little bit with age. But for the most part, it's a very noticeable glow in those dark conditions. Takes a little while for your eyes to adjust though, so it's not one of those like turn off the lights and right there. It's not like that at all. It's definitely just like I said, that subdued kind of glow going for it. It's enjoyable, but let's face it, it is not one of those things that's going to replace something else in your life. Like you're still going to need your solar lights in your yard or that type of thing. However, the company Light Bio that developed this petunia, they're saying like this is kind of what we're hoping to get to, that we can start doing this with these plants so that you will be able to replace maybe a light in a room or an outdoor light or something like that. So we'll see how that all goes. So it's an interesting first choice. Now, as far as the plant goes, if you just think of it as a petunia, it's actually quite attractive plant. I was surprised because it does get covered with these beautiful pure white blooms, and it gets a lot of flowers on it. I would say the flowers are, I'm going to say medium to small compared to a lot of the other petunias that I normally grow. And the habit is definitely compact. So I think the tag says like 6 to 10 inches. I think mine got right to about the 10-inch mark, and that's where it capped out. Now it is possible that it could get a little bigger, but this is not one of those varieties where if you give it lots of fertilizer and you baby it, that it's going to get much bigger than that. It tops out at about that 10-inch mark or so. Maybe you could get it a little bit more. So keep that in mind. And that also is important if you're going to be planting it in, let's say, a combination with other plants. Do not plant this with really other vigorous varieties of plants. So if you put it with a vigorous petunia or verbena or calibrachoa, there's a good chance that those plants will just swallow it up and it'll block out the light and your poor expensive petunia won't make it. So I would recommend, putting it in its own container. They recommend putting all 3 plants in like an 8 to 12-inch pot. I put one per, I think it was maybe an 8-inch, maybe it was a 7-inch pot, and it filled out nice, kind of just looked like a little bowling ball sitting on top of there with these big white blooms. So it worked out pretty well as far as the sizing goes. Yes, if I had a 12-inch pot, you would want to put 3 of them in there, but this is not one of those that I would really strongly recommend for your combinations. It's also not the kind of plant that, like, if you plant it in containers like on your front porch, this is not a plant that people driving by at night are going to stop and want to know, what is that plant glowing on your porch? They're not going to see it from your driveway. At least even if it's completely dark, I doubt there's going to be much to see. You can see it from like across the room, that type of thing, but it is not that kind of glow. So if you want to get it because you want to be able to talk about it, you're going to be the person who's initiating the conversation about it. Look, this is my petunia that glows in the dark. It's not going to be one of those where they go, tell me about that petunia that you have that I saw glowing in the dark. So just putting that out there. Now, The marketing for this was very interesting because when they put it out there, they did this media blitz, and it definitely seemed like they were going for broadest audience of high-income people. That's just how I assessed it, because it seemed like they were really focusing more on like home decor and like people who wanted like this novelty thing in their home. I did not feel like they were marketing this to people who garden or people who grow things at all, especially because there seemed to be a bit of a push that this petunia was an ideal houseplant, which made me chuckle a little bit because I was like, I really don't think of petunias as great houseplants. A petunia is not a pothos. And why I say that, because these petunias need quite a bit of light, probably more light than you're going to get even from a sunny window. They also benefit from more air circulation than a lot of our houseplants. So a lot of our houseplants, they can handle, the conditions within our home. Petunias, man, if you don't have airflow over them, they might be prone to starting to rot or get slimy. They might get more diseases. And it might also, the humidity could be too high. They prefer to be with good airflow. So I thought it was funny that they were promoting that, and it was even more funny shortly after all the media events. A lot of the reporters who had gotten free plants and they took them home, there was basically like their Instagram pages were all like reporting back like how long did it take them to kill it. So some of them, like one person was talking about like, oh, they told us how it's really nice to put it next to your bed so that you see it in the night if you wake up or whatever. And I believe that you would be able to see it in the middle of the night. But they said, but I just didn't think about the fact that I also need to make sure that I move it back over towards the window every single day so that it gets water, so that they end up killing it. Other people, I think they just said like, they didn't have good luck with it, mainly because I think early on, or at least with these reporters and stuff, they were basically selling a glow-in-the-dark plant to people who wanted a glow-in-the-dark plant, but they did not want to grow a glow-in-the-dark plant, which makes me laugh. So for those of us who grow things, I think we can kind of sense that there might be issues. And also they were trying to jump, I think, on the houseplant craze that's out there. So they were kind of saying like, this is going to be like the craziest houseplant. You're going to be the only person with a glow-in-the-dark houseplant. And people were eating that up, I think, not realizing that petunias are different than some of your other houseplants. So that would be that piece of it. The other thing that is definitely missing from their marketing information is, or intentionally omitted, I would say, is that this is a genetically modified plant. So I can totally understand why they're not doing that, because genetically modified or GMO has a lot of negative baggage. A lot of people are very much against that, so they don't want to be associated with that. And a lot of the negative or the negativity towards GMO is not so much that GMO plants have a bad reputation or that something terrible has happened with them. It's more of the prospect or the concern about them, whether it be, what are they going to do to our native plants and that type of thing, or are they going to be misused in some way? Are there some ethical issues with this? So there's a lot of conversation around genetically modifying plants. The funny thing though is, like, I've heard a lot of people who are very, very against it, but then if you ask them things like, well, have you used or been interacted with any like commercially grown corn, soybean, canola, and there's cotton? If you have interacted with any of those crops that are grown commercially, chances are you have interacted with a genetically modified crop. And a lot of people don't realize that genetically modified things have been on the commercial market for a long time. They have not, though, been like available to the public like this one is. And there's also a genetically modified purple tomato, or really dark tomato, that came out last year as well. Those are kind of the two products right now that are out there. They are USDA approved, and the company Light Bio did say that they chose a petunia specifically because in most of the United States it is an annual and it does die back. It's very, very low risk that it's going to become invasive, and that it's going to affect the native population of plants in any way. I also think they also picked a petunia because it's one of the best-selling plants in North America. So they picked a plant that also everyone was familiar with and people were buying anyway. They just were making it glow. So there was a little bit more marketing to it than just the altruistic, we just didn't want to pick a plant that might affect the world. But the USDA has approved that plant as well. So take that as you will, but they definitely are not mentioning that in the marketing. So what was it like growing the Firefly Petunia? Well, first of all, I had gotten it in the mail. So it arrived to me in boxes, and then inside the boxes were, I guess you call them kind of like a clam wrap type of plant. And the ones that I got in were in like about a quart size type of container. So they were relatively large plants. So that was nice to see. They were a decent size when I got them. And again, I paid $107 for them. This year, they are going to be available from the Light Bio website as well as Home Depot. And you can get 3 plants for $39, but The compromise is that they are smaller plants. They're going to be more plug size. And plug size, I'm not sure what size these are going to be. I have not ordered them. But think of maybe a little bit bigger than your thumb is what the root size is going to be. And you're going to put those into a container. That can be a little bit of a challenge for people. So if you are getting that smaller size, I want you to be really careful about how you water this plant. And I would recommend starting maybe with just a middle-sized container, whether it be maybe a 4, 5, or 6-inch container, putting it in there, and then really monitor your water. You don't want it to dry out, but you also don't want it to be too wet, because if it's too wet, those roots aren't going to develop. So you want to just kind of keep it kind of, so that soil is always just kind of damp, but don't go crazy with it. Keep an eye out for also bugs and things like that might appear on it as it's growing, because when they're small, they can be a little more susceptible to, like, if fungus gnats get on it, they can eat up the roots and it can take down the plant a little faster. Know that even that small plug, like within 6 to 8 weeks, it's going to get probably to, 8, even maybe 10 inches if it's being fed properly and getting the right light. And as far as fertilizer goes, you fertilize it like you would a normal petunia. I would use a water-soluble fertilizer 1 time a week. So I'm going to mix it in with the water that I would normally water my plants with, based on whatever the directions are on the container for the fertilizer. And then I'm going to just water that day with that fertilized water. And I find that works really, really well. So it doesn't have any special kind of care. Also, the flowers do automatically fall off on their own. So it's self-cleaning, it deadheads itself. However, you might notice some little brown flowers on it that you might pick off, but you don't have to. If it's like some varieties, if you don't pick the flowers off before they're done, or if you don't do it before they go to seed, then the plant stops flowering. That wasn't the case with this one. This one just kept going and going. I had one little lull in the middle of summer, but I don't know if it's because maybe I was lax on fertilizer, or if it just got really hot and humid for a stretch. I'm not sure what the conditions were, but it was like a 2-week stretch where I was like, oh, it only has like half as many flowers, but then it just came back gangbusters, did great. So happy to report on all of that. So it's pretty normal as far as petunias go, pretty easy to grow. I would recommend that you plant it in a container though, because that will allow you to put it in spots where you can enjoy it when it's dark out. So you can put it, find a dark spot in your yard. Also, it means you could carry it inside, and if you want to show somebody, you can go in a closet or maybe a windowless bathroom or something, and then you can really look at it and enjoy it. You could also bring it in and put it on your bedside. Just remember to take it out every day so that it is getting enough sunlight and the air circulation as well. So that would be my suggestion with that, because it's not a great house plant. And if you put it in the ground, I'm sure it'll do fine. I didn't plant mine in the ground at all. But again, if it's not super dark out, you're never going to see the glow. If you're never going to notice the glow, then just buy a regular white petunia. You'll be, just as happy with it. So you want to be able to enjoy this plant in the dark. So putting in a container allows you some flexibility in where you put it and where you can enjoy it as well. Now, I did not overwinter my Firefly Petunia indoors. Fortunately, I do have a friend who did. Now, he works for a university, and he has gotten permission from Light Bio to be able to propagate the petunia itself, because Light Bio owns the patent on the plants, so legally you're not allowed to collect the seeds or take cuttings of it or anything like that. However, Light Bio has said in a statement, like, they are not coming over people who are doing this in their home for their own enjoyment, that type of thing. They just want to be able to control who can sell it. So if you propagate it, as long as you're not selling it, I don't think there's going to be any trouble, at least not at this point. However, Light Bio definitely has the lawyers involved, because when I ordered from them, the confirmation email had 3 attachments, and none of them were about the plant or the care. It was about the privacy policy and the terms and conditions, all the legal kind of mumbo jumbo. It wasn't until the plant actually arrived that I got a sheet of information that was about, the care and the plant itself. So I thought that was kind of funny. But anyway, back to my friend who has been propagating them. Realize he has them indoors, but he has them under really good grow lights, and he has a fan blowing on them, so he has the air circulation going. So it's not a matter of just sticking them by the window and they do great. That's not necessarily the case. It is fascinating though, but because he's doing this research with them, he's been getting all kinds of crazy patterns and colors. Some of them are absolutely gorgeous. Like some of them are like, I would probably buy that petunia if I had them. And he said they all are glowing. So that's another really good feature about him. However, he has some that are really a dark, dark purple. The flower on those don't glow, but the leaves and the stems do. And he said it's kind of interesting because you have this dome of these glowing leaves, and then you have these kind of black holes where the flowers are. So he said at night it is very interesting to watch, even though it's not glowing like the beautiful white ones. It's a completely different experience seeing them that way. So just thought I'd throw that in, and so you can keep them indoors if you want. Just realize that you're going to take some extra care. And I do want to emphasize that if you get that small plug size and you plant it up, you have to be really careful with watering. One thing that I noticed with mine, when I planted up, and mine was the bigger size, I planted it and nothing happened for 1 week. Nothing happened for 2 weeks. I think it was after 3 weeks. It was almost 4 weeks before I saw any growth at all. And that's not normal for petunias. Usually when you plant them up, they start to grow quite quickly. Usually within a week, you notice a difference. That makes me a little suspicious that maybe they have been treated with a plant growth regulator, a PGR. And that's common with especially petunias, that they get sprayed with that. Basically, a plant growth regulator puts the plant into suspended animation. So it stays that size for a certain amount of time until it grows out of that plant growth regulator. Now the plant is still alive and it's still growing, but very, very, very slowly. And that allows these plant companies to be able to have the plants for you when you need them, because this is an industry where, all the plants are, everybody wants the plants at the same time. So by using those plant growth regulators, they're able to have those plants hold for a lot longer. Problem is when you get them, they do not take up much water. They don't need much of anything really. And it's very easy to overwater. So fortunately, we know to check the water on those and the moisture in the soil. We actually put our finger in a lot of times to check them that way. Or there are moisture meters, but we've gotten used to using our finger or lifting the pot, and we know how heavy the pot should be. And if it's not getting lighter, we don't add more water. But if you don't know that, you might just say, well, gosh, it's been 3 days since I watered it. I better give it more water. And that can actually drown the plant and cause problems. So you have to be so careful with that. Now, PGRs, or plant growth regulators, a lot of people throw those into the category of, oh my gosh, it's like a pesticide or herbicide. It's its own total category. I don't know a whole lot about them, so I'm careful about, I'm not going to criticize them or promote them, but I don't feel like I'd be the right person to use them, because I probably would misuse them. Because if you overspray a PGR, that plant might be in suspended animation a lot longer than you want. Another little thing you may have noticed when you are in the houseplant section at the big box stores, everything always looks great and they look beautiful. And here they are in this like dim light. The lights are 20 feet in the air, and those plants always look good. Well, that's because most of them have been treated with a plant growth regulator, which keeps them at that size. And that's also the reason why you may bring them home and they look great for a couple weeks, maybe a month, 2 months. And then all of a sudden they start to grow and they look mangy and they don't look anything like what you bought. And you're like, oh, I'm so bad at growing these plants. That has nothing to do with it, folks. It really is those plant growth regulators. Once it grows out of that, it takes off, it starts growing. Sometimes they even grow a little bit different than they would have normally. Not always. Usually they grow out of it eventually, but that's the reason why some people have a hard time with plants that have been treated. So anyway, got off topic there. Let's get back onto the glow-in-the-dark petunia. So are they worth the money? Well, if you're someone who's been debating the price, I'm going to say, don't bother. It's okay. You could put that money towards a lot more plants or to bigger plants, and you're going to probably get more enjoyment out of them. However, if you're someone who has just an interest in these plants, you think you're going to be fascinated with kind of the unique nature of this plant, or if you want to teach your kids or grandkids about bioluminescence, or you want to be able to show your neighbors and have them come over so that they can learn about this plant a little bit more, you want to be a hub for that, then I'd say definitely get it. If you like to have the new and interesting, this is definitely a plant for you. Like I said, if you're strapped on cash, don't spend your money on this plant. Spend it on something else. Spend it on food first, then you can think about plants. But hey, I know we're plant people. We're going to spend it on plants. So spend it on get more plants, get more bang for your buck out of those. But this is a very interesting plant. It was an enjoyable plant to grow, but I will admit the novelty grew off for me. After about 2 weeks, it was just another petunia in the yard. I had stopped taking it inside to look at it, that type of thing. So I think ultimately I would have been just as happy to go visit a neighbor who had one rather than have one myself. But it is a pretty cool plant. I also want to point out that there are some independent garden centers that are going to be carrying it this year. And if I were to buy one, I probably would go to the independent garden center, not because I'm in that world, but because I think you're going to get a bigger plant. It is probably going to be more expensive than the little plug ones, but also they're going to be growing it on. They're going to be treating it like their normal petunias. So it's going to be ready for sale. It's going to be ready for you. And you're not going to probably have to worry about that plant growth regulator issue that I mentioned, and they'll be able to talk you through it a little bit better as well. And so if you go to the Light Bio website, they have a whole section that shows you where they're located throughout the US. We are not carrying it this year. And I don't know that we will, although it would be nice, like we would put a dot in an area that there aren't any other dots, but it wasn't on our list. We're not going there. But again, I don't know what price these independent garden centers would be selling it for, but you will probably get a bigger plant, and I think it may actually be a little bit better plant. I will say the quality of the plant that I got last year was good, so I think the plugs will be in good quality, but you are going to be 6 to 8 weeks away from it getting to a decent size. Meanwhile, what you get at the garden center, you're going to see what size it is. You're going to know. Again, this is a 6 to 10 inch petunia, so do not expect it to be one of those big overflowing baskets of petunias. Not going to happen with this. So I hope that gives you guys a little idea of what to expect and help you make a decision if you want to get it or not. Again, you can order the small ones from the Light Bio website or from Home Depot, or you can look at their map on their website and find out where it's located. Maybe there's one near you. So go ahead, check on that, and buy from one of those companies too. So thank you guys for watching. Hope this was helpful, and I'll see you guys all in the next video.